tonight for me then if you have the list.
Sure, I can do that. I'm pulling it up right now.
And could we get the agenda up? And do you have access, Ken, to the procurement and contracting site on Basecamp?
Yes. One, yes, I can pull up the agenda, and also, yes, that I have access to Basecamp.
Great, because if you could you pull up the folder that is marked recommendation templates so that we can share those files one by one while we're discussing them throughout the meeting?
Sure. I'll
Because there's
go.
4 templates that are filled out with somebody's name with them.
Okay. I will put the agenda up, and then I'll just have those files ready on standby, and just let me know when you're ready for them.
That's perfect. Thank you, ma'am.
And I just want to say I'm so excited and so proud of all of you for crafting your recommendations. They were amazing. I think you guys did an incredible job, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about them tonight. So good job.
Thank you.
Good thing.
Well, I'm very proud of everybody. I know I seem like an ogre, but based upon the information I had, that's why I pushed so hard. And if you notice, I was apologetic about it towards the end, but for the most part, I was insistent throughout. I'm sorry for that, folks.
No, I think you led us into a good place, got us to a good place where we're actually a little ahead of schedule, if you can believe it. So that's a great place to be. I'll go ahead and call the roll if you like.
Please.
Okay. All right. Commissioner James Moses.
Here.
Commissioner Zaki Anwar.
Present.
Commissioner Annabelle Torres. Commissioner Chris Cortez Zimmerman.
He will not be here tonight. He sent me an email.
Excuse absence, that's right. Commissioner John Funny. Commissioner Danita Knight.
Present.
Commissioner Marco Palma. And Commissioner Beth Wendell.
Here.
All right. Very good. Pass it over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we're devoting the entire meeting tonight to going over the recommendations that we wrote up. I think it's important that we at least, and I'm sure we all are aware of how we crafted our individual recommendations and see how we can blend them into one cohesive document that flows from what we considered the beginning of the process to the end of the process. Now, that may not be 100% possible because of our different writing styles and mental processes, but from what I've read so far, there is enough overlap in each process, and there's enough complement throughout the entire product that it doesn't look like 5 or 6 different people got together and wrote the product. They were writing along the same vein of thought throughout. So I think we will have an easier process of going through and making one product. But in respect to Chris, since he's not here, he did have some issues, or I won't say issues, but he had some questions for us, and he shared those with us yesterday. Since Chris is not going to be here, I personally feel uncomfortable of trying to give any detailed answers of why we did what we did. Now we did it because I would like his immediate feedback to see if he understands our thought process behind that, or if he totally disagrees with the way we did it. But I think we can touch on some of the things that he addressed in his email to us last night to let him know that we respect enough that he took the time and effort to put it in writing, that we will try to answer his processes for him. Because he told me he will be reviewing the video tonight. So I want him to see that we give it due diligence. Just because he's here doesn't mean he's not a part of our group. So that being said, where would we like to start? We have 4 written recommendations in front of us that we've each either paired up on or, yes, ma'am, Beth.
I was gonna say, do we need to approve our minutes?
That would be wise, yes. Excuse me from
Sorry,
skipping.
I thought before we get into it, maybe we should do that. So
I write them, I send them out. I don't care. Like somewhere. So, please, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Those opposed? Oh, if we're going to rest on formality, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Yes.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, ladies, for keeping me honest. God knows somebody has to try. But going back to our major task tonight, we have our 4 recommendations written out. And I thank you all for moving mountains to get this done, because as Stephen has said, we're actually a little bit ahead of the schedule now. Because the way it was put to me in the beginning, this was, our drop dead was the first part of November. And that's what I relayed to the team. That's why I pushed so hard. I found out later, we've got a little more time. That's great. That gives us a little more time to wordsmith it and to come together as a complete group to agree on the pieces that we're presenting together to make our final recommendation. Because if there's one piece of the puzzle that does not fit well with everybody, we need to see how we can shape those edges and make it fit into that puzzle correctly. So that being said, who would like to start off?
Saki.
Go right ahead.
Can y'all see that, or is it still showing my Chrome?
It is showing, it's not downloading your image.
Okay.
That's the one thing I found about Basecamp. If you click on the icon, it asks you to download it. Then you have to download it somewhere else. Then you have to open it. There we go. Now, if I might offer a suggestion, the other day when Chris was asking what would be the best way for us to do our edits and such, my suggestion to him would be, if you see a product that you really think we might want to tweak a little more, download it, make your edits, and then submit that to the entire group. If there's no major pushback, and trust me, I think from reading through everything, we're all on the same wavelength anyway, so I don't see a lot of pushback on anything. Maybe wordsmith or something. Somebody may be better at wordsmithing the entire group, because like Chris, he's remarkable at building these things. But if there's no major pushback, then those edits will be the ones that we accept and move forward with, not only for the sake of time, but for the sake of sanity, because I don't see any of the things that we've done so far a hill to die on. I think we've done an excellent job working together and getting these out there. So that's my recommendation. Please, Danita, you have the floor and use that Zakir.
Oh. Okay. Danita, you want to get started?
Okay, now,
Okay.
if we could make them just a little larger, Kiana, if that's possible.
Is that size okay? If not, I can go back to just the regular view and then you can just tell me when to scroll.
Okay, if we could go back to the regular view, as that's still a
No
little
problem.
small, at least on my screen.
No worries.
Thank you.
Yeah, because some of us are over 50 right now, Keith.
There we go. Terrific.
Trifocal.
So Zaki, please jump in where you see fit. But our subcommittee obviously was procurement and contracting. And so you see the issues are the two topics that we wanted to focus on, which get to selecting the recipient of a contract and then reaching out to potential companies and partners. In terms of background, I won't read that. You all see it there. It just basically provides information, historical information about how many contracts were awarded in the recent past to vendors who are identified as minority owned. And then in terms of the issue, inequity, or problem, that also showed that the key there is that 73% of respondents who identified as minority-owned businesses were not aware of the city's procurement process. And then 60 of them currently do not receive information about procurement and contracting. So clearly there is some opportunities based on the data to engage and also educate vendors on the procurement process and to work on the communication channels.
That was a very, very important data point for us to think through what is working and what is not working. Because sometimes if you can get a data point that points to an area that clearly says that there is a gap, I think that's where an opportunity exists, an opportunity to bridge that gap, and to bridging that gap can come in many different ways. So what we've done is we've tried to summarize, as you'll see later as Danita kind of goes down. Over to you, Danita.
Okay, thank you. So in terms of the rationale, that explains itself as well. And I think Zaki did a great job of just sharing what actually is the rationale that we've tried to make note of. And so, Kiana, if we'll look down a little bit, thank you. So our recommendation focuses on a simplified, easy to understand, more accessible, streamlined contract process, ideally with no structural barriers, with the goal of ensuring inclusive, equitable opportunities for all business owners. And then we made a point here to say with emphasis on small, ethnically diverse businesses. The other, any questions there, Zaki, anything you'd like to amplify there?
Yes.
Okay.
If you think about it, right, the recommendation does not really go into what is possible. We do not have a very pointed recommendation, but rather what we're saying is it should be simplified. Simplified can mean many things to many different people.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to, I think the next step in the process actually is to determine what simplified means to the vendors,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that can vary by the type of contracts that are going up. And again, easy to understand, again, is on the same lines, that there needs more work that needs to be done, working with the vendors to understand what is it that is easily consumable by them to respond to these RFPs, and more accessible. In today's age, everyone assumes that sending something via an email is, people easily access it. It's an assumption that we make, right? Maybe the vendors, direct interaction with the vendors can actually prove and help the city better understand what are those medium that they would like to be contacted through. Is it an email? Is it a mail? Or whatever that could be. And each one of those that we have outlined are areas that needs further intervention by the city to determine what needs to be done. And the whole thing about no structural barriers, because too much technical jargon, or not enough opportunities to understand, not having enough time, are all through the different pieces of literature and research that I was able to do, came out to be acting as structural barriers for minority-based vendors, especially those who identify themselves as minority vendors, right? So how do you, there may not be any systematic barriers, but there could be structural barriers, right? And some of that, the earlier paragraph that I had there that listed the article, it also shows, if I can maybe, or if somebody can bring that up, we can also see on page number 7 of that document.
Tiana, if you can scroll up, it was right before the recommendations.
Yeah, if you can actually bring up that website. Yeah, it's there. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. And then once it comes up, if we can go to page 7 of that. Thank you. Yep. And it talks about all the key moments that are, and how does, the structural factors and strategies that can be used to mitigate some of those issues. The processes, the key moments are getting a contract, getting utilized, building bonding capacity, and so on and so forth. And I think this is a very good article that was written through research. If you can go all the way to the first page, please. The cover page, yeah. This is this was in partnership all the way up. It actually tells who this was written for: the Local and Regional Government Alliance on Race and Equity. So a lot of good stuff has already been done, especially on procurement and contracting, and a lot of time and money has already been invested. So I think if we can leverage some of those, I think it'll really further the cause that we're working towards. If we can now switch over to the other document, the Word document. Thank you. If we can go back to go down to the recommendations, please. Thank you. Yep.
So would you like to take this one, Zaki, please?
No, go ahead. I can add color codes.
So are there any comments based on what we just made reference to in terms of the first recommendation? And Zaki, thank you for that great explanation. I see your hand up.
Yes, I'd also like to say that I agree it needs a little bit more fleshing out, although I know we don't need to totally tell the city exactly what to do, or they may not do what we say, but I liked that article. I thought that article was very clear, and maybe that would be the way to flesh it out in a more, because like you said, it may be different depending on what type of contract it is and so on and so forth. So, but I thought that article was extremely clear, and even putting 2 or 3 of those concepts into our recommendation, I think would explain what simplified and easy to
Mhm.
understand and accessible and all that means.
Mhm. And I think
And
it's also,
Zaki-
thank you for that, Beth. I think it's also really important when Zaki made reference to this, to understand that we don't have to create something from scratch. There is a lot of good content out there. And I think one of our roles as a group should be to find that good content and then try to elevate that to benefit Brookhaven.
And in the document that I wrote with the bullet points for us over the conversations that we've had,
Mhm.
two of the strongest documents that we had in the beginning, I gave direct links to those publications for the city to expand on or whatever, to use as a model for their upcoming efforts. So, and Zaki hit, and you did right now on the head, there has been a lot of time and money devoted to this subject matter. So what we're doing is not really reinventing the wheel. We're just reminding the powers that be that this material is there. These processes are being successfully used in other areas, and they might want to look at them and see how they can make them work for themselves.
Mhm.
Carrot and stick. You know, we sweet talk them into go reading the stuff, but strongly suggest you see how this works for yourself.
And it's a cliche
If
phrase that I
there's
prefer not to use,
any
Jim,
more
but best
discussion
practices,
on this?
best practices make sense, and that's what we're making reference to.
Well, what we are suggesting though are best practices. We're not in the position to be able to dictate policies or procedures. But
Mhm.
what we are dictating or in a position to do is to suggest best practices. Now, it'll be up to them to take our suggestions and say,
Mhm.
yes, I like them, no, I don't. But that's the only position we have right now is, and in the meeting the other day, I did glean from Leslie that we were basically looking at best practices to
Mhm.
suggest. So
Mhm.
I
Okay.
know maybe some people don't like the phrase, but it is a commonly used business phrase. And I don't think that it has any ill intent associated with it.
Mhm.
Gabby,
That
go
was
on,
one of the
babe.
reasons.
Please.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons we did not try to make it very detailed and
Right.
pointed in certain areas, and rather try to keep it at a level where further work can be done.
Correct.
Okay. Great.
Because once you go to level 0, there's nothing further down. But if you keep it at level 5, then you can start defining what the level 1 and 0 could potentially be.
Mhm.
And I think that's what we have to be aware of, what our true role is. We're giving advice, but we don't own the final product. So if we could, let's go back to the one I wrote, because I tried to use a more simplistic way of approaching the subject matter. And I tried to use more of a, as I was talking to a friend or colleague about how we're going to do this.
Mhm.
So my language was not structured as strongly towards a business aspect, but maybe a more common sense way of approaching this. So if we could pull mine up.
Did
I'm
you
not
all have
saying-
a chance to share the second recommendation? Did you all read that? I
Oh,
forget.
it was there. We didn't amplify it, Stephen. I'm happy to go through that. Or
Yeah, maybe if y'all read that and then we transition over. I just want
Okay.
to make sure we get both of them. Yeah.
We
Okay.
really need to make sure that we're on the same page. So
Okay.
please continue.
So we will wrap it up after this, but the second recommendation there is that the commission recommends that interactive communication channels be implemented for all vendors. And the communication should include information on open contract opportunities, relevant deadlines, networking events, informational and training programs, and be a primary point of contact for business owners.
Great.
The three things that we highlight here, right? One is that there should be interactive communication channels, right?
Mhm.
What are those channels? I mean, at this point, we are not really clear because I think it depends on the relationship and the individual vendors.
Mhm.
So that could be a number of different media. So we just say that whatever media it is, it should be an interactive communication channel, right? It is to be determined as to what the channel could potentially be. The second is, of course, having open contract opportunities and all of that. But the third primary thing that we try to highlight here is it should include informational and training programs, because how do you otherwise bring somebody who is interested in contracting with the city but is not aware of the process?
Mhm.
And they'll never be able to overcome that structural barrier because they've never been through that once.
Mhm.
So I think once you go through that informational training program, and then you start getting through the system, and once you get used to the system, then you can actually become a regular into that system. So those are the three main points that we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I just want to offer a point. I appreciate you unpacking that for us, Zaki. As you were talking about the informational and training programs, I thought about both the document that you all referenced before, the Government Alliance on Race and Equity. I think they had a mentor protege
They did.
program that they referenced in that matrix that we saw, as well as some of the work that I think it's Boston and Seattle have done to intentionally reach out to minority-owned businesses and create kind of like little academies or like cohorts of businesses to really start to understand what are the city processes around contracting, and how to navigate that successfully from end to end. And I wonder if this may be a place for us to just kind of drop a couple of examples in there, or maybe be a little bit more specific in that language. I love what you guys have crafted. I think to get to the meat or the essence of what we're putting forward, I'm wondering if we may need to sharpen that just a little bit to be more specific.
Okay.
But I love it.
I think I like that idea. I think maybe we can use words like mentorship. Maybe we can divide this into 3 sub-bullets and be a little more, succinct in it.
Mhm.
So maybe we can take that as our work to do.
Okay, that works for me. Thank you all
Awesome
for the
feedback, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you, Danita.
Thank you. Teamwork.
Now, when we started the discussion last time, it was brought to my attention, we didn't really have a mission statement. And I used the phrase mission statement. So I tried to craft something that was actual, what we're trying to do, but try not to be so heavy-handed that it automatically turned people off. That's why, I said things like to enhance the process to foster equitable best practices in the solicitation awards of city contracts. Now, there may be a better way to say that. And as I said before, when I set this document out, the only thing I'm actually married to is my wife. So anything that wants to be changed can be changed without any argument on my part. I understand that. And then I borrowed some of Chris's original things to flesh out my background so that they would understand where we were coming from and how we were trying to craft our document. So that's there so anybody can read it and offer any suggestions if they want to. But if we could scroll down a little bit, please. There we go. Now, through our review of the procurement processes, which means Alex and I actually did, and I shared the other night, an example of an RFP that is currently on the website. It's 31 pages. It's for design work for sidewalks from point A to point B. And we first get a history lesson on the founding of Brookhaven and when it was founded. And then it goes into other details about what is required. But I think if we looked at the entire document, my main thought in this is if you get a new vendor on board, they're going to have somebody dedicated to go through the entire request for procurement, the solicitation, to dig out each and every element that they have to address in their bid. That's going to be very time consuming. And it's also then the documentation that the city requires that they provide to accompany their bid. So if they're selected, all of the ducks are enrolled, they can bring them on board, is also going to be very costly. So by making the language as plain as can be and cutting down all of the technical jargon within that bid process, we could possibly open the door to smaller businesses, because they can very quickly choose to participate or not participate based upon the scope of the contract or the one-page written document that we have suggested that the city provide. So I went through and talked about the fact that the city has avenues of reaching out to the community to let them know that there are opportunities to work for the community. I mean, they have social media, they have print. They also, it would not hurt if the city would contract with a translation service that can work across multi-platforms to also put this information out in multiple languages that are relevant to the demographics of Brookhaven, because there may be some very qualified people out there who, as you all have touched on, who are not aware that this is even going on. And if they find the information, may not feel comfortable with their ability to take it apart and put it back together to compete. So if we offer the product to them in their language, so they can look at it and say, yes, I want to try to do that. No, I know I don't want to try to do that. You know, it's not telling them off the bat. No, it's giving them every piece of the puzzle up front and letting them make a business decision on whether or not they want to participate. So, and that's why I think, and to be honest, I used the language for the recommendation that was provided by Steve, who is the CFO of the city, because if he thought enough to give us language that he thought might be relevant in our conversations, and we might want to consider, since his department will be the one tasked to implement these changes, out of respect to him, because his verbiage was very good, why not use it? It helps overcome a hurdle that we may not have to even acknowledge exists, because we're including them in the decision-making process. But there it is. I think it's pretty cut and dry. And from going to the pages that we've seen and the contracts that were associated with some of the Excel files and such, we see that those are large, very complicated packets that they're sending out for bid. There has got to be a way that we can get rid of all the technical jargon without dumbing down the bid, because we still have to have a quality product at the end of the bid cycle, but a way to simplify it enough that everybody understands exactly what they're bidding on and what they have been awarded. So. That's all I got on mine. I wanted to keep it quick. But again, please, if there's anything that you see in this that you think you might want to change, or you think you can say better, or whatever, please take it. It's yours. I have no ego on this one. Beth, let's do yours right quick.
All righty. So when I started talking about the assessment, Chris actually made some astute points that really all of our process was an assessment, you know what I mean? Starting from looking at who was awarded the contracts and who bid for the contracts but didn't receive it, even before we got to the survey piece, the part we did with the 4P assessment tool. And so I referenced that in the background information. The other piece that he suggested in his comments on the follow-up was that we maybe continue that process, like that beginning piece of continuing to look at who receives and who doesn't receive contracts. I didn't include that in my recommendation, but I think we should. So that what he sent via, I guess it was via Basecamp, to do that again, like basically for all of that to be part of the assessment, using the 4P tool, looking at who gets the contracts, who doesn't, and then also an annual survey. Just want to add that because while I included that in the background, I did not include that in the recommendation, but I think we should. All right. Any questions about what I put for background? All right, we can go on to the inequity piece. So one of the things I noted was that it was really hard to, not that we couldn't see inequities, but it was hard to qualify what the inequities were based on the lack of responses to the survey. But that in and of itself means obviously we need better tools to assess. If only 33 people respond, that's pretty bad. So we need better tools to assess. So that's basically how I address the inequity piece. Not that there aren't other inequities embedded in that process, but that it was hard for us to assess based on our survey. And to that effect, I noted that in the rationale that sometimes inequities are hidden. They're not always readily evident. And so having, a more thorough, a qualitative, measurable assessment process that's clear and also accessible for people, I think is very important to find those hidden inequities that we may not even see in the assessment process. And so I think next was considerations. And mainly what I said there was that one of the comments, we did not receive a comment about providing it in other languages than English from our survey recipient or respondents. But I think we should, because there are so many, I think at least providing the process, and the assessment, all those things, and Spanish was great. maybe language as well. So that's why I only put English as a second language. Another consideration, and someone did note this in the survey results, would be to provide our assessment and any other parts of the bid process as well, in ways that consider people who are differently abled. So one of our respondents did cite that as a need. So. And then finally, for my recommendation, I kind of put it in 3 pots, basically to have an annual or more frequent, I mean, it could be quarterly, could be annually, could be biannually, review process, that should include a standardized survey. For tracking sake, you'd want the questions to be the same year over year so you can see if you're making improvements. A standardized survey implemented by a third party, I think we might get more response that way. Available in at least English and Spanish, possibly other languages. And as we did this time, include vendors both who were awarded and those who were not awarded contracts. And then as a third piece, I think we should really try to target businesses that might not normally respond. So minorities, persons of color, women, those who are differently abled, and other small businesses, to make sure that they can respond. If they don't even know about it, it might be hard for them to add any, we may never discover the inequities if we don't hear from the various voices. So finding a way to reach out to those businesses and say, hey, what do you think about this? Will you please do our survey? I don't know what that would look like, but I think that's really important, because if the same old people are always the ones doing the survey, we're probably going to get very similar results. So. And that's all I had. That, and including Chris's, if I had to put a number 4 in there, I would say to continue to review the body of work around who does and who does not receive the contracts. He thought it would be good to look over that over the long haul, not just with the survey, but with the but just keeping a running record of that, which I know they do. So, any questions?
No, I think you did a very thorough job. Once you got started, you got on a true roll. And again, I see overlapping themes through all the recommendations about outreach to people who may not be English speaking and things like that. That seems to be the tie-in for all of our recommendations so far, is reaching out to our community who may not speak English or who may be of a different culture and may need to be approached in a manner unlike we normally do for the common business model that we use. Some people are very reserved and respectful in the way they do business, and the way we present ourselves is sometimes a little bit off-putting to others because we are more direct and goal-oriented and things like that. So, I think that's great. Now, since Chris is not here, I'd like to still pull his recommendation up because a lot of the things that Chris.
We got Zach.
Yeah.
Myself with our hands up. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I didn't see your hand. I'm sorry.
Yep. While we were looking at Beth's awesome work, Beth, thank you. Kind of just thinking through one of the recommendations there, that I think it was the first recommendation, if it's still up. I'm just thinking loud here. We talk about annual or more frequent reviews and assessments. What if in a given year there were only projects related to, say, parks, right? And we send the survey to vendors who have no work and nothing to do with park development. They're working more on the roads, on the IT or whatever other areas that city chooses to procure its services. And when they do get a survey in a year when there were no contracts awarded, does it skew the data, right? Because their reactions would generally be, I was not involved, you know, I'm just guessing. The typical human reaction could be, you know, I was not involved in the process. So would it, thinking loud, should we be recommending more exit surveys or process surveys for all of those who chose to participate in an RFP process? Like how you have an exit interview if you choose to go and leave a company. So maybe a process survey for everybody who chose to participate in an RFP. And what is that they liked, what is that they didn't like, and all of the other recommendations you have here. That's something to think about. Does it make sense?
An exit survey, that way anybody who has bid or participated in a contract, as they're leaving, give honest feedback on how they felt the process was handled. If they felt that they were respected throughout the entire process and that they were dealt with fairly, because that's important. Because when you deal with people fairly and honestly, they keep coming back to work with you. When they find out that you can't be trusted because you have rules and regulations that preclude them from being successful, they'll take their business elsewhere. So that's an excellent idea. Steven, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I like that idea too, an exit interview. Would that be just for the firms who were awarded contracts, or would that include a subset of people who competed for but weren't awarded the business too?
I'm thinking everybody who participated, who chose to participate in the process.
Right.
But
And
everybody,
the city, go ahead, please.
yeah, everybody who chose to participate in the process, meaning anybody who had submitted an RFP or who may have received an RFP. So everybody involved in the process, because only then you can start drawing the metrics around what worked and what did not work. What are the right questions to ask and what are not the most helpful ones that can get us in the right direction.
Yeah, I wonder also, I think that's a great idea, to get that more detailed information about the actual process from those who went through it. I also wonder how we capture the sentiments and views of people who maybe for whatever reason, you know, couldn't navigate that process. If they experienced some barriers or kind of they didn't have enough time to, you know, put together a bid package or whatever. I think getting to the heart of some of those issues from those kind of on the ground small businesses would still be good. But I don't know how to do that. And I mean, I don't know if that's like a survey and what you're talking about for those who navigated the process. I mean, it has to be something that's, I guess, you know, workable for the group that's implementing this. But yeah, I think all these ideas are great. One other thing, I do like the idea of the third party leading the survey in English and Spanish, and if other languages are appropriate, add those in as well. I think the policing subcommittee right now, or maybe they just wrapped up their survey to community partners, and I think they used a third party as well. That was something that Christian was supportive of. So I like seeing that kind of reflected in ours too. So yeah, great job. This is good.
I think more people would be more apt to honestly address their concerns in a survey if it was done by a third party. I know when I was with the federal government, Booz Allen always did our agencies and most of the federal government's employee surveys every year. And all of your answers were confidential, but unfortunately they broke their data out by grades, ethnicity, and gender. So if you had 2 white males, grade 12 in your office who said this, and this was not going right because management was not doing their job right. And it turns out you only had 2 white males, grade 12 in your office. You knew exactly who was saying that management was goofing up by the numbers and XYZ. So how those questions and how that data is collected and given back to the city is very important, because you don't want to be able to, if somebody feels that the whole process was just a mess and they don't want to deal with it again because it was just so messed up, you don't want to be able to go back and be able to identify that particular person and say, well, that's somebody we'll never ask again. No, you just want to know that you had a person out there who felt that it was a mess and they can do better. Well, am I right or wrong? If I'm wrong, let me know, but that's my feeling on that.
And just to add on that, we were talking about the surveys, the exit surveys. So maybe we are, the city, we can suggest that city identify, specific places within the life cycle of a contract. Maybe at the beginning, whatever that could be, when you're sent an RFP and when the RFP is submitted, because then the stakeholders change. The number of stakeholders in the beginning could be more, and as you kind of go through that funnel, the stakeholders become fewer and fewer, right? So we can certainly suggest that there could be surveys at different points in the life cycle of a contract. So we are making sure that there are no issues with regards to social justice, race, and equity throughout the process of the life cycle of a contract, not just at the beginning of an RFP stage.
Well, I think it's recommended. I wouldn't try to tell them how to do it or at what cycle to do it, but to recommend that there be a process involved with their contracts where they can get feedback on a regular basis of how the process is going, so that they're aware of what's working out right and what's not working right, so that they can fix it more quickly than waiting a full year before the cycle is over and then go back and wade through all of this. I like that idea. Well, if we have no more on this topic, I would still like to look at Chris's, please, because again, he was very instrumental in giving us all feedback the other day. And I would like to look through his, because his was also the germ of ideas for a lot of what we're doing, because of the simple fact of how in depth he went into his subject. And I'd like to see that, please.
Can y'all see that?
No, I just see I see Beth's. I don't see anyone else's on my screen.
Uh-oh. I was like, why is no one saying anything?
Yes.
Y'all see it now.
Chris went into a lot of fine detail. And his is really, really good. I mean, I'm not going to try to pick it apart because you can tell this was a recommendation that was crafted with some thought. And there's some good data behind it to logically defend this recommendation. But I would still like for, as the group, we go through it so that we have an understanding of what he wants to do. We don't have much time because we've only got a couple of minutes left. But I would like to go back to what I suggested in the beginning. Everybody, if you want to, pull down a copy of something you think needs to be edited, make your edits, give it to the entire group. If there's a consensus that the edit is strong enough that this is what we care to go forward with, then that will be the recommendations that we use. And that'll get us one step closer to, because I'm not aware yet how they're going to combine all of these recommendations that we've made into one master yet. And we will probably find that out this month when we go to the meeting.
Yeah, it's not quite maybe as complex as we're thinking. I think what we're expecting is really just these kind of one-ish page recommendation sheets that will just literally be one right after the other, that will compile kind of a series of recommendations from each of the subcommittees. So the form that they're already in right now, I believe, is almost exactly the form that we're expecting to receive them from the subcommittees.
Okay, great. So we are ahead of the schedule, folks. So all we have to do is sit down and review them. And if there's some wordsmithing that we think needs to be done, or maybe a point that was not made as strong in some of the recommendations like mine, we can insert those points in there to make it stronger. And then we can move forward. But we have the rest of the month to do that. So, this time it's not going to be Jim sending you nastygrams every other day about, we're behind. No, I'm gonna let the group run at their pace. But we do know that these are due next month at about the first week of the month. So let's, as much as possible, get that done and get them out there so that we can maybe have one last quick look by email as a group to say, yes, I approve this. No, I don't, because there's an old saying about we either hang together for sure, we will hang individually. So let's just stay together on this, try to put as cohesive as we can. Yes, Stephen.
So our next subcommittee meeting is going to be on November 8th. That's
Correct.
Monday, November 8th. And I believe we're looking to get all of the recommendations in from each subcommittee by the 12th. So by the end of that week. So we've got one more meeting. And I would recommend, maybe if there's one person who feels comfortable kind of compiling all of those recommendations once the changes are made, so that we kind of have like a packet of recommendations to review at that meeting on November 8th, just so that we've got everybody's 100% comfortable with what's being forwarded along to Chris Lab. That might make it easier.
Now, I will tell you that I don't feel comfortable compiling everything because I have been jumping back and forth between different operating systems and computers to get things done. And I find it very confusing, very hard to be able to switch back and forth. So I would like to take myself out of that round, if you all don't mind, because I don't want to be the one to be the reason that we don't get it done. And I'm being very honest with you. Yes,
I can go ahead and compile those for y'all. If y'all can just get them all into base camp. I don't know, y'all let me know what day they'll be in base camp by, and then I can go ahead and compile them into one document for you guys.
Okay, I tell you what I can do on base camp, because they usually tell me to, and you all correct me if you want, but I'll create a folder under our recommendation folder, a subfolder that says final. And that will be everybody's final edits put in that folder. So she only has one spot to go to gather all of this data and put it into our final recommendation. Is that all right with everybody? Okay, it looks like we've done as much as we can, so I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I have one quick question for
ma'am.
Zaki, if I could just adjourn. Zaki, I thought your recommendation about my recommendation that Stephen also piggybacked off of was really good. Would you mind putting that in, just replying in base camp somewhere with what you said? And then I'll make sure to include that in my final document, because I'm going to include what Chris also mentioned.
We'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. And thank you all for all the hard work you've done. I'm very proud of the product we have now. There is enough overlap on everything. It talks with one voice.
Yeah.
And that was what was important to me. It does speak with one voice. So again, thank you very much, everyone. And I'm still waiting for the motion to adjourn.
So move.
Is there a second?
I second.
I'll second. Good night, everyone. Take care of yourselves, please.
Good job,
Good night,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a good night.
Good night.